how did you end up getting into the Marines? And then I want to find out, like, from there, like, how did you become a combat videographer?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it all started when it was about my junior year. I had I was at a track. I was actually at a wrestling meet, and one of the Marine recruiters had come up to me, and I was like, "Not a chance, buddy." I was like, "No, not a chance. Get away from me." Well, it came my senior year. We were actually at state for track. Same recruiter came up to me, and I told him, I was like, "Hey, I tell you what, I will join the Marines if you have a video or a photography job." I didn't know that existed. Not even 2 days later, he gives me a call up and he says, "Hey, I got you a video job in the Marine Corps." I thought he was kidding. Nope. Sure as anything, he got me that video job.
Huh.
And before he knew it, I was shipped to boot camp, shipped to MOS school, which is your training school. And right after that, I found myself doing combat video and combat photography over in Iraq. So,
what was the training? What was the training for that? Like the AIT, Advanced Individual Training.
Right.
So I was in personnel, and honestly, ours was pretty hokey. Our training was pretty hokey.
Yeah,
Go figure. But I'm wondering, like, how in depth did that get? What are they teaching you at combat videography? Like, here,
right.
when you getting shot at, like, hold the camera up here and hide behind something. Like, what are they teaching you?
Yeah, so a lot of it is just your basic video skills. Like I figured we were going in there learning how to get shot at and, shoot back at with the camera. But we shared it with the Air Force, the Navy, and, the Army and Coast Guard. And, as you know, they don't shoot as much as Marines do. So we kind of just learned the basic video concepts of editing, color correction, audio, all that and stuff. I think the real training that we actually got when it got to the point of actually doing our job was the pre-deployment training after our MOS school or our AIT school in retrospect. So in that class, I mean, it was a good 5 or 6 month class. I mean, they went into the intricacy of how to troubleshoot your camera, and there was we did a couple of of paintball type simulations when it came to training. They're
like, here, you be videoing and we're going to shoot paintballs at you.
Yeah, and it was just all fun and games at that point. You got one guy videoing and you got 10 other guys shooting, and they're just laughing because you're getting just pummeled and stuff. But when it got to the seriousness of it, like for pre-deployment training before you hit the combat zone, you really get tested on where you're at and what you're doing. You can really get when you get into that mind zone, you can get into that little LCD screen, and you're kind of sitting there, following it. But before you realize it, you're like, oh, I'm in the middle of a combat zone. I should probably look out and take my horse blinders off and really like concentrate on what I'm doing and how I'm taking shots and look at my background, or look at my foreground and background. But a lot of people were like, oh yeah, you only shoot the camera. I had my weapons with me right by my side. Marines, riflemen first, as they always say. But
right.
It's also knowing the difference between pulling up your camera and pulling up your weapon and stuff like that. So
yeah, like when is it to the point where hey, I should be defending myself here,
right?
And quit documenting this, or
yeah. And sometimes at some points it wasn't necessarily yourself; it's when you seen your buddy,
yeah,
and you realize, oh crap, they need my help, or something of that sort. And like I said, you see it in the camera, and it's like you're watching a movie. You're actually part of the reality, but you're actually watching the movie.
Yeah.
And it gets intense. I'll say it gets more intense and you're more into reality when it comes to actually editing and watching the video over and over again. That's when that reality hits you. When you're like, oh, wow, I was there. I was actually filming that.
Yeah.
Why was I doing that? Why was I just standing up when I should have been kneeling? Those kind of things, and they really hit you. And then it's lesson learned on that too, like you learn your lessons. Some of our guys didn't get lucky in learning those lessons like I did, but it's just it's a heck of a field to be in too. Like when you're carrying, I was known as the guy that destroyed a lot of equipment. Like I definitely upped our budget in our combat budget for camera equipment, because every time the supply guys seen me, they're like, you broke another one, didn't you? And these cameras aren't cheap. They're
Yeah.
$5,000, $6,000, $10,000 cameras, so
Yeah.
it was kind of one of those things where
Do they do anything to do they do anything to toughen those cameras up? Do they do anything to camouflage them?
yeah. Well,
You wrapping it with some burlap? I mean,
we like some of the lenses, we had a little bit of camouflage, but honestly, the when it came to the cameras themselves, no, not really. Like, they're pretty tough. We had when I was out there, which was back in 07, 08, when I was out there, we had the Canon Mark IIs,
yeah.
and then what was called the PD-170s with the mini DV tapes. Right
Okay.
when that HD kind of came out, but it was on the tapes. And I mean, we always called those PD-170s, we always called those bulletproof. I swear, like, those things, before we switched over to, I believe it was a Panasonic digital solid hard drive based camera, those things, I mean, you drop it from a two-story floor and go down and just wipe it off and it'd still be working, like.
Wow.
But as far as preparation, no, like, the hardest thing I found out there was two things: was keeping batteries charged.
Ooh,
Like,
yeah.
when you're in that heat and everything, you got them all in your pack behind you, and you're trying to switch out, and your battery's only lasting 10, 15 minutes, and it was fully charged before you went out there on the convoy or patrol. That was hard. And secondary were we called them the chameleons. They're basically radio blockers for the IEDs, the improvised explosive devices. And you stand next to them, your whole camera would just go on the fritz and just wipe everything clean.
Oh.
So you had to be careful. And when you hopped in the vehicles with them, you had to make sure your camera was off.
Because
And
if it's on, it's going to be susceptible to that jamming or whatever they were
Right.
trying to do there.
right.
Sorry, I was just grabbing my own.
Oh,
I felt like I was far away.
Yeah, I thought it was Simon Says.
I wasn't
like,
signaling. No,
I probably shouldn't have said that.
No, sometimes I'm just on autopilot over here.
Yeah.
I'm not sending signals. Cody makes it sound like I'm sending
Yeah, it's
signals.
okay.
No. That's interesting. So did they ever get into telling you, like, this is what you can film, this is what you can't film, or what are the lines? Do they teach you what are the lines, or do you go out there and just kind of figure out what the lines are?
I think a lot of it was they did teach you. They did tell you what to look for and how to, so to speak, cover certain things up. But I will say, on the moral line is your own personal moral line. What am I doing? What message am I sending as I send this footage or photography back to the Pentagon or DIMOC or DIVIDS or whatever they call it? There's multiple acronyms, but we'd send it back to the Pentagon, and they would basically just either, if it was classified or unclassified, then they would send out the footage. When it comes to that, they'd always tell us, hey, hearts and minds, Marines, hearts and minds, and they would instill that into us. But it's war. Like, there's bad things that happen. There's things that were that recorded that will never be seen in the eyes of anybody, because I just felt it wasn't morally right. But there's a lot of things out there. It's like, hey, I want this to get out there. And you got to be careful how your story is portrayed too, because the media will always mix it up.
Yeah.
And I seen that tenfold when I was answering to the commander who was asking, hey, why does XYZ news station have all your footage up there and they're telling the story this way when it actually happened this way? And then I'd have to put everything out there and say, hey, this is exactly how I had it. This is exactly how I had everything. And, it basically proved my side of the story, proved my innocence on, I didn't feed the story this way. They manipulated the footage this way. So, I guess in long and short, to answer your question, is like, yeah, we were told, hey, have cultural awareness, be aware of your surroundings, know what you're recording, and know how to tell your story. But when it comes to actually telling your story, it's how you see it, and it's in your eyes,
Yeah.
And like me, I always believe I have high moral values. If I seen something was happening to a local that, maybe a military guy shouldn't have been doing, if I wasn't tackling him, telling him, hey, don't do that, I was at least shutting off the camera, or I was knowing that, hey, maybe that footage shouldn't be around. Have a talk with him or his commanders or staff NCOs later, or staff non-commissioned officers later. So
Did that ever cause like any, I don't know, are guys stressed out about footage that you're capturing and they're like, hey man, like,
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna ask. Like,
Did that
did you have
cause-
buddies come up to you and say, "Hey, cut that out, would you?"
Yeah, I would, but that was all in gaining trust in them. They would know that I wouldn't do anything to do harm to the unit. They were my brothers and some of my sisters too, and if they were doing something dumb, I'd be like, hey man, or I would be able to at least filter it out, And I'm not saying they were doing something illegal,
Right.
just
Yeah,
something that wouldn't make Marines look smart, which we know there's plenty of stuff out there that doesn't make Marines look smart.
right.
But we'll leave that comment to itself. So with that being said, though, that building trust, it all started from pre-deployment, because we were considered individual augments. So what that means is we would be attached to a unit, like we'd have our own unit, and then they'd attach us to different units.
Okay.
All the way out. So I always kind of considered myself a free bird when I was out in Iraq. My master sergeant and my commander hated and loved me at the same time because I was doing my job, but they could never find out where I was at. One day I'm in Ramadi, the next day I'm with the Army out in Al-Assad or Heat, as they call it out in Iraq. And then 2 days later I show up at the center of command. And they're like, where have you been? I'm like, well, I've been all over the place. Where have you been? Like we've been here the whole time. Like,
How are you getting around? Are you just catching rides? What are you
I was
doing?
catching helos, helicopters, meeting new people and saying, hey, I need a ride out here. There's a mission out here. So there's protocol in the military. And I don't want to say I was breaking it, but you have to be on a manifest.
You were adapting and overcoming.
Yeah. And I would sign up on a manifest for each of these different missions that were coming up. I'd go to each of the center commands on, the different bases around, and I'd say, hey, well, what's this mission? Or what's this mission? Hey, I want to be on this one. By that time I can get there, I can literally jump off when they get to this and hop on another convoy and go over, elsewhere, wherever we were going. So I was North Iraq, South, more so Eastern in the Baghdad Ramadi area, and then Western in a place we called KV or Korean Village. So I was all through what's called the Multinational Forces West when I was deployed out there. So like I said, I called myself a freebird. I was either with detainees, canines. One of my favorite missions was the Mother of All Generator missions, 2-story generator that we took all the way across Iraq over to Baghdad and put in the river, and it was able to fire up and power half of Baghdad. So
Wow.
it was a cool mission. We did detainee releases, detainee inspections, you name it. We were doing all sorts of stuff out there, and it was fun for me because I could pick and choose. Say, I like that mission. Let me do that. That kind of thing. And multiple times. I mean, I was with different forces and stuff. We were with Aussies, Australians, Brits. There's Ugandans out there too.
Huh.
So the Ugandan soldiers, they were the ones that were actually just watching over the forward operating base. So you see a Ugandan and you'd be like, Jambo, and it's like their way of saying hi.
Yeah.
So it was always nice to see them, especially when you got off a mission and you can actually eat, decent food compared to MREs or any type of rations and stuff like that. So, but yeah, it's just crazy to think, Aussies were there and we did a lot of training with Brits and Aussies, and they're cool guys. Even went out and had a couple drinks with them afterwards too. Those stories I'll leave for later.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, that's a whole different one.
Thank you for watching this clip from the Big Fat Podcast. You can catch the whole episode on every major podcast platform. If you like seeing the video version of these, we post the podcast in its entirety on our YouTube page, Big Fat Lunchbox. Consider subscribing. Why? Because it will make you feel good. Hit the bell to be notified every time we release a new episode. And remember, your support makes this all possible. Whether it's breakfast burritos at the trailer or ordering sauce to be shipped directly to you from our website at bigfatlunchbox.com. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next episode.